Okay, part 2. Hopefully a little bit more lightweight because the air is deoxygenized or something. So this was the requirements for vehicular communication and a little bit about spectrum planning. So I did my PhD on this communication theory kind of generic competence. And then afterwards, I've applied it to vehicular communication and to industrial automation. So after graduation, I did this industrial postdoc thing. So then I was at Volvo, the diesel version of Volvo, working on trucks. So there was lots of European projects at the time, and they had each vision. So this was a vision back in 2008 about the connected world of cooperative systems. So the idea is that everything is connecting, both public transport, private cars, everything else within the infrastructure, also emergency vehicles, and everything should just collaborate and be connected to internet. So this can be divided in 3 main parts: safety, efficiency, and value-added services. So safety is for traffic safety. Efficiency is for traffic efficiency as well. As long as you collaborate and communicate, you can work together to reduce congestion and travel time. But this still had lower priority than the safety parts. So it was mainly that you thought you came as far as you could come with passive safety and active safety that does not communicate, so like airbags or seatbelts. And the third one was even more unrelated in some sense. So it's just some sort of value-added services that would motivate the cost increase. Because if you put communication equipment in it, you need to sort of have something extra that can be offered. So there was those 3 things. And as a researcher, I was focusing on safety because the other things seems less, you could use it with existing technology, but safety was kind of new requirements. So the idea was to have different types of traffic safety applications. There was a whole bunch of them. This is from the Car-to-Car Consortium, European collaboration framework, let's say. So all kinds of applications like this: overtaking, vehicle warning. All of these things you can do with onboard sensors, but the idea was that it was better if you also communicate. So if you have somebody in the blind spot, it can tell you about it. Or even more, it can say, okay, I have this many passengers on board and I'm this heavy, which means it takes this much time to brake and other things. So the idea is that you extend the reaction time of the driver, or you extend the safety margin because you enable the driver to react on things that they don't really see yet. So the main motivation for this cooperative active safety functions is that you can see around corners or see further ahead, further vehicles ahead. So this communicated messages, they contain something extra that the sensors cannot sense. So sensors is mainly for looking or getting information that is there but not being sent deliberately. So here you can actually get the status. So like if the steering wheel is turned, or if the blinker is on, or if the brake is on, or so this is difficult from getting from the other sensors. And if you combine them with the sensors as well together, then the idea is that you can have added value. So like 1 + 1 is no longer 2, but 3, perhaps, if you go do them at the same time. So some sensors are sensitive to weather, some cameras, for example. Radars are sensitive to other things, and then communications is to a third thing. So the idea is that not all 3 fail at the same time. So the basic foundation for active safety was to increase survival rate. But with connected active safety, the idea is that you can avoid the crash altogether. So The European project SafePot was from the vehicular manufacturer's point of view. So the idea is that you start from the vehicle, you have some sensors already, but with communication you can extend the safety distance or the awareness horizon of the driver. So it focuses on this. So inside each vehicle, you build something called a local dynamic map. So you had a basic map from a provider, and then in the SafeSpot projects, we needed to have an additional layer here because the GPS were not accurate enough. They're starting to be better, but still. So you needed some landmarks for referencing to make it closer than the GPS could do by itself. And then on top, on this, the next level, you would have regional info, like a fog or a traffic accident or something. And on the upper layer, the top one, you would have every vehicle broadcasting its position, speed, and direction. So this will be the most dynamic part of the map. So you build it up in different layers, and the higher up in the layer, the more dynamic it becomes, and this one becomes more stationary. So if this is what you want, you would have different types of messages based on this. The main discussion has been of two types of messages, and now I'm using the European lingo. The American has a similar way of thinking, but uses another lingo. So in Europe, there are two types were called cooperative awareness message or environmental notification messages. It doesn't matter. One is time triggered, and the other one is event-driven. So the top one will be from the dynamic map. So every vehicle broadcasts position, speed, and direction in a periodic manner. And the other extreme, then you only broadcast something if something happens, an event of something, which could be a hazard or it could be less severe thing. So these have different requirements. The two types of messages have different requirements. So for example, because you repeat a message periodically, the requirements on dropping one is not as severe as if you don't repeat it. But you can't assume that everybody transmit the position, and some are quiet sometimes, because then they become invisible for this type of dynamic map. So here is when the cyber-physical parts comes in, or the real-time communication. So it interacts with the physical system. So it's the timeliness of the value that is important, not just the value itself. So you can do an excellent result, but if it's not done on time, it's still wrong. If you use a cyber-physical system or a real-time system to extend the wheels on an airplane for the landing gear on an airplane, you can do it very correct, but if it's after you have landed, it's still wrong. So there's some point in time where the result is not useful anymore. So I know some guys call it firm deadlines and hard and soft real time, but I would like to divide the two parts. You have either a hard or soft system, or a critical essential system, or you have a hard or soft deadline. So the idea with a hard deadline is that it becomes completely useless after the deadline. No use at all. You can throw it away. Soft deadline, it reduces interests afterwards. It's not zero, it doesn't drop to zero anymore straight away, but it's not as good as if you keep the deadline. So this one could look different depending on, it could be exponential or some other. Here I just did it linearly decreasing. And I don't have any times on anything here. So this could be like milliseconds or days, or we don't know. But this is the idea. So after the deadline, it's either useless or less useful. So then, if we have these two types of messages, so now I'm going to do what you're saying, and then you throw out questions to the audience, and then they don't answer. So I have a solution for this. So now I would like you to focus on this, the periodic time-triggered messages. and tell me whether they have hard or soft deadline, and also the reliability part, and whether it's high reliability requirements or medium reliability requirements. And because nobody wants to guess something and feel really stupid, then you can answer using your smartphone. So if you go to this one, please, you can vote. And I don't know who's saying what. Yeah. But something is happening with my computer since it got erased, so it's not aligned, but I think we can still see the results.
Only by phone?
No, a computer is fine too.
Oh, okay.
Something with an internet connection. Something with an internet connection. So this was the cooperative awareness messages, the top level of the local dynamic map. So we have one vote on soft deadline, medium reliability. You can only choose between high or medium. I don't tell you exactly how high is. You just, yeah. So we have 3 votes, but all of them are on soft deadline.
But I still have to give my name, right? So
No, you don't have to give your name. You just say no or ignore.
Anyhow, I said that.
And I don't know where it's recorded, your name anyway, so I don't know how to find it.
I didn't understand the question yet.
So now you can't see the title. So the question, this is also, I would like to move the whole thing, but it doesn't work. So this is the
title is what is needed by Kent, right?
yeah, cooperative awareness messages.
Position, velocity.
Yeah, position, speed, and direction, broadcasted periodically.
Is it only that you can answer only one? You can only make one choice in this.
I don't remember how I did. So I will say that nobody is right so far. And you're all answering the thing that I thought as well when I started about this. And you're going to probably blame me for definitions and things.
Why is it hard deadline?
So I would argue that hard deadline is when the information is completely useless afterwards. The same way I didn't tell you how high is high reliability or how high is medium reliability. I also didn't tell you when the deadline is. So exactly, but we have a periodic message, so it repeats periodically. So let's say that the deadline is equal to the period. Can we assume? So that means that when the deadline comes, a new message arrives. So if I'm saying, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. So what if I didn't manage to send one of the messages over there? Should I send it after the deadline? So then when I'm saying I'm here, then I would be saying here, I'm there. So I mean, I have a new message. So the new message is more important. So the old one, as soon as I have a new message, I have a new position, which means that the old one is really not useful. It's not only useless, it's actually dangerous. Is misleading.
It's like the tunnel example that somebody gave.
Yeah.
But isn't it the other way around for the person that receives the message? If that person didn't receive the latest message, it can still use the old message to extrapolate.
You can do some dead reckoning, and then you have some, if you have timestamps as well, so that the message actually arrives, you know it's the position that was this time ago.
And then you still have usability after the deadline.
Yes, but if you have a deadline, it also means that you have a new message. So isn't it better to start trying to send that one?
Of course, if you can get the new message, then take the new message.
Yeah.
But if you cannot get the new message, then the old
Yeah, but
message
that's
has
another
to
thing. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but if the deadline is when a new message is available, then the old one should be
When one is available. And
yeah.
when
So if the deadline is equal to the period, it means that the deadline is when a new one comes.
Okay.
And then in the transmitter, if you need to choose, should I send this one or this one? Then you should throw away the one whose deadline expired because you have a new one. So I'd say this is hard deadline, but I can agree that it's medium reliability, because if we didn't get it, we can use the last one, some dead reckoning and some things. So in that sense, it's medium reliability, which also tells us that we should throw away the old one and then use the other one instead. So for me, at least for me, when I started, this somehow feels counterintuitive, because position messages shouldn't be any hard things about it, it felt like. But it is actually, yeah, it was maybe moderately useful before, but afterwards it's really not useful. But reliability, because you repeat periodically, is not the end of the world if you miss it. So if the reliability says something about the criticality, then I agree. So almost everybody does this one wrong, because they don't define things maybe. And then it's not good if you being the one shouting out, because you want to, yeah. It's better this way, I don't know what you answered. So what about the other one? As a hazard warning thing is saying, help, I'm colliding. Event driven. So what do you say about that one? And now it says, yeah.
So what does event driven mean?
It means something happens. If I notice that I'm emergency braking. Okay. Whenever emergency braking comes, I send a message. I don't do it periodically. It's just when something happens. So emergency braking. I want to transmit my message.
Just by the nature of the question, it has to be there.
You all agree high reliability. Okay, here comes the medium. But otherwise, high reliability seems to be common sense. And I would say that too, because if it's something that's really important, if it's a hazard and you want to communicate it, the reliability must be high, because you want to convey the message. But the deadline again, so if I missed it, I give up. Is that good? If you have an airbag, let's say that the airbag, it takes about, I don't know, a second or so. No, maybe it loses pressure. So it takes like very little time to inflate. And if you miss the moment in time when the crash was starting, should you give up? I mean, it's still worthwhile to inflate it, even though you might not save the face, you might save the body. I don't know. So it's still, you shouldn't give up. And it becomes even more important in this one, the hazard warning things. So of course I want to send a message whenever I can prevent the accidents from happening. But if I can't make it, if I can just mitigate the accident is still good. And even more with vehicle communication, everybody broadcasting. If I miss this one, then I can still prevent a chain reaction, chain collision, like in the Autobahn or something. So this is really soft. You should, and probably because it's high reliability. So you should do everything you can. Everything is better than nothing. Something is better than nothing. And it's high reliability. So probably when there's an event, you should send 10 of them at the same time or something, dispatch. So for me, counterintuitive somehow. So if we have these communication requirements for vehicles communicating with each other, either they do position messages or hazard warnings. They are cooperative, or it's active safety, so it's a distributed cyber-physical system. They require low delay, reliable, time-critical, scalable wireless communication. So low delay because not because it's a fast system. Real-time is about predictability. But low delay because it leaves the driver with more time to react. Reliable because this is life and death messages. Time critical for the same reason they are connected. Scalable, we don't know how many vehicles are around. And wireless, you can't have this cable car things. And it's kind of a harsh, dynamic environment that changes a lot. So because this is different from most other existing applications, they are not some off-the-shelf protocols that are good to use. So this thing with reliable and timely, they sort of go together in some sense. So if you have a delay in communication, it's caused by two things. It's some queuing delay to get access to the channel, wherever it's some part, and it's the transmission delay, how to get across. And if it's erroneous, then you need to retransmit. So this queuing delay, the channel access delay, the time from when the message is created in the transmitter until it can be sent. This one you can make upper bounded. So this one can be known. It depends on the MAC method, but if you know the MAC method, you can determine whether it's predictable or not. But the time from message creation until it's received by the destination, this can never be upper bounded, ever, because there's noise in communications, and you know all the channel models and the things from last time. Because this depends on packet error rate. So here you can use diversity or redundancy to improve it, but you can't do anything else. So this thing about deterministic communication, I would say no communication is deterministic, period. So even if you have 10,000 parallel fibers, something can go wrong, Murphy's law, but the opposite is true too. So if you have infinitely many retransmissions, data will arrive, period. If you have deadlines, the worst case is always that it will be missed, if you want the worst case. So it's two parts, channel access delay and channel error rate. So you can cope with this channel access delay by having some sort of deterministic method, like TDMA or polling or something. But the other part, channel errors, you can never make it deterministic. If you have wires, then the main cause of channel errors is that you have concurrent transmissions, so collisions. That is the main cause. There is some crosstalk as well, but they solved it with shielding, so then it's fine. So that's why some control people and some wired communication people, they say that as long as you are sure they have exclusive rights to the channel, it is deterministic. Then they somehow forget that a very low error rate is not the same as a zero. So that's why sometimes you hear deterministic communication is because they forget that the model is rounded off. So for wireless people, we can't forget because interference is always there. And also a collision is not really binary anymore. So if we are communicating, then you might have a collision, but Walid might be fine because he's talking to somebody in the other room. So it's not everybody experience a collision at the same time. So I would say that control theory guys or this wired communication guys, they can still be excused because nothing in life is 100% certain. Even if you have excellent hardware, it will fail if the sun explodes. So now I just use numbers. I didn't use any numbers, just reliable, medium, or what. So how reliable or how low delay or how scalable does it need to be? And the boring answer is that it depends. It depends on what we communicate. So how long message, how often, what requirements, medium reliability, what happens if a message is lost, how many consecutive messages can be lost before it becomes dangerous. So it depends on this one. And then it depends on if we use hazard warnings or if we use these periodic positioning messages or completely everything, where you probably need both types of messages and maybe also a way of differentiating between them or prioritizing between them. So depending on how you realize this, it will have different requirements. Also depends on where in the control loop we are. So if we just send raw sensor data, observations from all our sensors, there will be lots of data being sent. But if we do sensor fusion, it will be less data being sent. Or even if we don't do sensor values, we just send the action of the driver. like the steering wheel angle or the blinker thing, then it will be even less communication that is required, less bandwidth. But at the same time, we start to rely on that everybody would take the same action given the same observation. And that might not be true in all cases. So it's safer to send the raw data because you don't build in lots of assumptions or different brands or some. But at the same time, we need to rely on that everybody would do the same action. So probably the more vehicles that are connected, the more we need to move towards action, because otherwise it will be too much data that needs to be sent in a limited geographical space. But at the same time, we can maybe say that we will use the same control algorithms or the same input decisions. The other problem is how this information is used when it arrives on the other side. So can we use it for warnings or for predicting things or for advice? How trustworthy is it? And how do you know it helps and not just confuses or stresses the driver? And this is also a way of regulating. So the more reliable communication we have, the more autonomous we can become. So if it's not very trustworthy information, we can only inform, like the GPS does. So right now I don't have any GPS coverage. If it becomes more trustworthy, we can warn, advise, even guide. And if you want to steer, then it needs to be really reliable. So this could also be a way of regulating the reliability, because the reliability of the communication will change with time, space, and frequency. So in some cases, we would maybe go from guiding to advising only, with a disclaimer on top. And the last part is validation or verification. So how do we know it helps? How is safety improved? How can we verify this? And if something goes wrong, whose fault is it? Scalability issues. So from a communications point of view, we've done lots of calculations for capacity for cell phones and internet. But these were all made for a centralized structure, centralized networks. Right now, we don't have any performance limits for decentralized networks. They are only partially known under some specific conditions. And also the foundation of information theory is this capacity, which is just throughput, basically. But throughput we don't really care about for vehicular communication. Throughput is not important for cyber-physical systems, most of the cases, especially if you just send sensor data. So instead, for vehicular communication, you should have a successful message reception as a function of the number of vehicles in interest rate, perhaps. And the other part is, even if you've had heterogeneous systems before, in a factory, for example, it's still the same owner of the factory. So you have one goal. But here you have different goals, different stakeholders. The road operators will have one view of it. They would maybe want to pack as many vehicles on a road as possible. Individual guys will want to get to work faster and things. So some of them it's contradicting. So how do you solve this in a good, fair way? So the other problem discussion about this is whether you should have, we all heard about vehicle-to-vehicle communication or vehicle-to-infrastructure or vehicle-to-roadside units. But you can still do this different ways, either directly or via an access point or a base station. So this has caused lots of discussion, where there should be an ad hoc structure with no communications infrastructure. I had a big problem when I started to work at Volvo, because my first job was to talk to Ericsson, the base station provider, let's say. So if I talk about traffic, Volvo means road traffic, Ericsson data traffic. I talk about infrastructure, they mean base station, and then Volvo means road signs and things. Even worse when you start to talk about collisions, data collisions or vehicle collisions. But the idea with this was to have an ad hoc network, a VANET, and it has some benefits because you don't have to worry about having coverage. if there's somebody there to collide with, it means it's somebody there to communicate with. If there's nobody there to communicate with, there's also nobody to collide with. So, and it reduces some delay because you don't need to take the detour. You can just bypass. And also there's no billing. There's no SIM cards or some. So there are different frequency band for this ad hoc structure. So in the North America, they have a 75 megahertz wide band at the 5.8 gigahertz. And this is a type of wireless LAN lookalike. So we have something similar, similar frequencies in Europe, this RTTT, but this is an RFID lookalike. It's like master-slave kind of thing. So we got 30 megahertz right next to it. In Japan, they can do more, decide what to do. So they got some lower frequency band, which is really reliable and good for vehicle communication. And on the same thing as Europe, they already had something on this band, an RFID lookalike technology. So in Europe, where I've been involved most, we got 30 megahertz wide. So remember the spectrum maps and the spectrum allocations, and also the requirements on maximum transmitted energy. So this is the band over here, and here we can use this much transmitted energy. Then you need to follow the pink. So see the pink here? So whenever you have a transmitter operating on this band, you need to make sure that the transmit power is this low here. You know why? Already before we got these 30 megahertz on the 5.9 gigahertz, we already had something on the 5.8, and that was the tolling thing, the electric tolling stuff. So we are not allowed to interfere with the tolling because that's collecting tax money. So in the beginning we had two. So we had two transceivers, and as soon as they noticed, so you had one just sniffing for this kind of communication, and as soon as it noticed it, it tells the other one to turn off. So you had one to just guard or watch out for this tolling system. Yeah. So this caused lots of problems within the European system. So in the beginning, when everything was new, then different strategies were used in different places. So everybody needed to cope with what they already had. And now I could have put a different title on this one, but I figured if I put this one, you're going to listen to what I have to say. Okay, it's still about vehicle communication. Don't worry. Okay, in the US, what are they good at in the US? Something that they are really good at is competition. If there's a competition, most people in the US will go, yeah, let's do it. They compete and they I don't know how to say konkurrera in English.
Compete.
Yeah, compete. Okay, just compete. So in Swedish we can do both, compete and compete. The other one. So what they did to use the best of the Americans, they just gave away a big frequency band, 75 megahertz at the 5.9 gigahertz band, and they just say, okay, go, start competing. You can use this technology if you have this ad hoc thing. Build it any way you want. As long as you build it to use this frequency, it's free to use. You don't have to pay for it. So start making hardware. Then you use the best what they're really good at. So in Europe, what are we good at? Well, I would say that we're not as good as other people are. So I think we're quite good at consensus. At least we spend a lot of time on it. We do these European projects with lots of different countries, and we talk and talk and talk and talk. And then eventually everybody's so tired to say, okay, let's. So what happened here was we had a lot of talking. So we did standards, joint European projects, and So it's still this way. In the US, they have a standard for communications, but in Europe we have for communications, for applications, for all kinds of different standards. Japan. What are they good at? You said it. Regulations. Legislation. What is good about being good at that? The government can decide something, and next day it just happens. So they could just decide, okay, now we do this, and then they had a whole country to test on because everybody was using it. So they're very, everybody follows the rules, so you just make things happening all the time. So this was what happened in the beginning. We were using, 15 years ago, when connected vehicles were new, all the different people were just doing what they do best, and everything was progressing really fast. And we were using each other's benefits. But now everything is, now it's not new anymore, and people are starting to see the business value of everything. So it's just about money, and it's about ugly discussions. So the rest of the talk is going to be about ugly discussion. Because it's a bit of fun. So right now, still, actually, there's a very heated debate ongoing about sharing the ITS frequency band in the US. And it comes from this, 75 megahertz. And the idea was that you can connect everything, cars, trucks, or whatever, and that would help to save life. So it's free of charge. You don't have to pay for it. You just use it. But at the same time, other free of charge bands, like Wi-Fi, is getting crowded. So that's why now it's a bit more not so fun anymore. So there's lots of discussions about allowing Wi-Fi into the... So there's Wi-Fi on 5 gigahertz band, and that's almost 5.9. So it's easy for the hardware guys to just... So just so you can understand how crazy this really is, 75 megahertz, you get it for free. We're going to look at some numbers from the frequency auction in Sweden in 2011. There they bought 2 times 10 megahertz for 431 million Swedish. So 75 megahertz for free. And they got 20 for 854 millions. So the reasons that there are different blocks is because there's different existing technologies, so you need to adjust some other things. But this is a big auction, and they were happy about this. They were the ones that want the thing. So here they give away 75 megahertz for free. That's why, heated debate.
Are these sellings time-bounded?
Oh, a little bit, yeah. That's why the discussion comes now as well. But still, they have been not caring about it for a long time. I think sometimes it's 2 years, sometimes it's 5 years. This is still in 99 they did this, so it's been a long time. But in 2016 they got tired of it. So then it was a cable industry, like Dell, Google, Intel, Qualcomm. They sent a letter to President Obama saying that this is the best licensed spectrum we have, which is not really true because the lower ones is better because it propagates further. But never mind. So this is the best we had. And it should be shared by everybody and open up for Wi-Fi. Because these vehicle comm guys, they haven't done anything useful with it. So this is a cable industry and also something called public knowledge, which describes themselves as a non-profit public interest group. I'm not really sure what that means. And also Open Technology Institute at New America describes themselves as a public policy think tank. Also not sure what they mean, but just remember. So ITS America, they were very skeptical, saying that, okay, if you say this, then this will hinder the safety things that we have ongoing here. So in May 2016, I forgot already when the first one, in April, they sent a letter to President Obama. In May, they sent another one called the DSRC, 802.11p in the IEEE standard. When it's used in Europe, it's called ITS-G5, and in US, it's called DSRC, because our roll-toll system was already called DSRC. So they just nicked the acronym, so we needed to. So never mind, it's the same thing. They wrote a DSRC coalition letter saying that, no, you shouldn't do that, because that would be an enormous setback for highway safety. It would delay the employment. And later on in May, so this is in say May, the FCC, which is the frequency regulators in the US, they voted to approve a public notice to test sharing of the same spectrum, to see if it works, to share it. So then they had to come up with something else. So in June 2016, just a month later again, these two guys that I said, I remember this to later, Public Knowledge and Open Technology Institute of America. So the other cable guys are gone, just these things, think tank things. They wrote a petition to the FCC saying, okay, never mind if you use this or not, you still need to check the cybersecurity and the privacy protection thing before you allow anything. And you should immediately prohibit all the use of it. Just block it. Because otherwise you have a Trojan horse created by the auto industry. So this was not about spectrum being crowded or anything anymore. This was a security accusation, if you will.
Were they thinking wireless Trojan horse or traditional?
I don't know. So then in August, the month after, you have an alliance of different people. Automobile manufacturers, global automakers, ITS America. They send also, again, petition to the FCC to deny the previous petitioner's request to stop it. And it does not collect or transmit or store any information. So the security risks are exaggerated. And then so then it was quiet. So see, Obama and FCC, they don't answer anything. So it's just, they just letter, petition. So in December, there was a proposed rule. So in the US, apparently, I'm trying to learn more, but apparently before a rule comes, you ask for opinions. So this is what the Department of Transportation does. They said that we are thinking about a new law, a new rule, to mandate DSRC on all light vehicles. What do you think? So this is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and DOT together. They have this standard, and this would require all automakers to include vehicle-to-vehicle ad hoc on all light vehicles. You had until April to do comments, and it did receive comments. So I grouped the comments now in 3 different types, so 3 different parties. So first we have the guys who, so the auto industry, the ones who wants to do DSRC. They now call themselves the Safety Spectrum Coalition. They strongly support the proposed rule, and this is just the American Trucking Association, automakers, ITS America, something. And it's really good, and we need to save it, because otherwise it will hinder the development, and keeping it would spur innovation and competition, and also. And they also, at the same time, why not, send a letter to the FCC to promote the release of this DSRC technology and to protect the safety spectrum, which is now what it's called. And they include if we need to share it and rechannel it, that would ruin everything, basically. So we can't share it, because then it's all or nothing. And the guys, now I don't need to, the Trojan Horse guys, I just call them the ones that say there was a Trojan Horse. They're saying that they have filed comments raising safety and privacy concerns. So it's a substantial security risk that needs to be rectified before we can do it. And you leave the door wide open for intrusive privacy violating commercial applications. And rechannelizing, sharing the spectrum, is what can be best to achieve public interest. And they end by saying, while NHTSA and the auto industry are in the driver's seat, we urge them to please drive safely. So these were the 2 competing sides. But there's also a third one, which is somewhere in between. Maybe it is this with, if you can't beat them, join them. So this is the cell phone operators joining forces with the automakers. And this is called the 5GAA. So they think that rather than moving forward with this regulation, you should have a technology neutral analysis where you compare both these RC and this cellular V2X before you decide anything. So this is 42 members, so automakers, and then Ericsson, Huawei, Intel, Nokia, Qualcomm. So it's not cable industry, but cell phone industry. So this would be my take on, if you can't beat them, join them, sort of. So this was until April that the comments were supposed to be made. But then during fall in 2017, there was lots of different media outlets saying that the Trump administration had decided to drop the mandate. So they had comments on the mandate, but they said that it's going to be dropped. So then the DOT, they said they had the following statement, that we have not made any final decisions on the proposed rulemaking. Any reports of the contradictions of the contrary are mistaken. It's almost like Mark Twain. So, but still, we think it's a life-saving technology, and safety is our number one priority. So it says it's still reviewing and considering the 460 comments submitted. And it has withdrawn, so this has to do, so nothing has happened yet, so we don't know if it's going to be mandated or not, because the Trump administration decided that they can't make any new rules unless they remove some other ones. So they need to remove one to get one, and they don't want to remove one, so it's just freezing now. So we don't know what's going to happen. So Europe is no better, of course, except that we don't send letters to presidents. We just sit in this standardization meetings and argue. So people, so much so that they get retired early because it's too much of a fight. So we had a similar thing, but the first fight was about this electronic toll collection system at the 2.5 gigahertz because it's so close it becomes problematic. So you need to have coexistence between those two, but it's now most of that fight is over, and they still and then it becomes this 5G system. So not Wi-Fi, but 5G instead once the frequency. But it's the same because most cell phones goes on Wi-Fi. Doesn't matter. So in my opinion, this heated debate will continue as more and more devices connect. Because the spectrum will become more and more crowded. So this becomes the case also as when safety things have to coexist with things of great economic value. So then I guess this is always going to be the case. So then you get some, just so you know that this is not, this is very biased conclusions. It's not general conclusions. So I think, in my opinion, this fight about the safety spectrum, it could be a way of protecting an outdated business models. So many of the cellular systems, they can still work ad hoc. They can communicate out of band. So the only reason that you really need the base stations is to charging purposes. So if we get a system that can survive without base stations at all, it will be problematic for the cell phone industry. But on the other hand, if DSRC is to be mandated, it starts with the light vehicles. I guess if heavy vehicles will follow, then I think the cellular industry would be able to produce an ad hoc technology that works very well and will outperform this. This will be no problem. But right now they can't do it. So if it's not mandatory, they don't have any economic mandate to do any ad hoc standards, because this will kill their business. The biggest customer is the telecom operators. So they can't find a system, they can't design a system where they don't charge for it, because they will ruin it. So they need to argue until there's no use in arguing anymore. Okay, it will be more serious research tomorrow. But I think this is a good for a 5 p.m. thing. Sorry it was long. Ian.
Thank you very much, Elisabeth. Are there questions from the audience?
Who gets the money for the benefits? So if you say,
So normally in the cellular industry, you buy a frequency spectrum. It means that you own that. Nobody else can use it.
but who gets the money?
So it's your operators. If you have a SIM card, you
Who
pay.
gets-
I mean,
they
if
pay
I
this
buy
money?
a
The
certain...
government.
The government.
The government gets it.
Yeah,
Which
of course,
government?
yes.
I mean,
In
is
it-
it
in each-
European?
No.
or just national?
Every country has their own.
It's like renting a national piece of land or trying to buy a piece of land from the government.
It's so amazing.
You're buying
Yeah, you have to
air. You're buying space.
Yeah, it's not long time you have to buy for air.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
unbelievable.
I'm very much for having these free spaces that you can do anything you want in, because it's really exploded in the 2.4 band. The innovations there has been enormous. But I didn't really understand why ITS industry is so reluctant to release it to for general purpose use, because I would think that on the roads there aren't so many Wi-Fi disturbers, access points, and so on.
Yeah, but I think it's just the mere fact that it can be. So then you could have other stuff like McDonald's commercials, or that could theoretically interfere with safety messages. So if you own the spectrum, if you're only allowed to use safety messages on it, you know that if nobody has a safety message to send, it's going to be quiet. If you use it for other things, then if you have an accident just outside McDonald's, it will be worse. Or
Actually, if it is forbidden, it does not mean that it doesn't happen.
Mm.
So if it is open and one knows it can be disturbed, other messages can come, then they are forced to handle that case. Otherwise, it is so easy to destroy. I mean, we have terrorism. How easy it is. Come on, they do not count with it, just bloat the frequency. It costs nothing.
but that's the case already now. I mean, now it's free, but it doesn't mean.
I guess it's a little bit of kind of an economic thing. So you make it a little bit harder for the majority of the people to easily interfere. But then, of course, if there's somebody that's really crazy and is willing to put up a huge amount of money, it's very hard. You have to do other things.
But I don't
You can try googling jammer. If you're in Sweden, then you come to our regulators, Post och telestyrelsen, telling you that this is forbidden by law.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. But I don't understand why to push and why to say cars must have this unless we have a solution which is safe. What kind of sense is there?
Yeah, but I think so. Now I'm using my Wi-Fi almost everywhere. Work, at home, in the bus. We have it between the campuses in Västerås, on the train. So the only place I don't use it is my car. So what if a Wi-Fi lookalike standard become mandated on all vehicles? Why would I ever use base stations again? Why would I have a subscription if I can? I buy an iPad without 3G, 4G things.
Yeah, that's true. But what I say is, you introduce something and it has opportunities, but it has also obstacles, and the obstacles are not clear. So why to force? And you say, okay, we talk a lot, but we talk a lot because there are still problems we cannot solve. So forcing.
But most of the problems are not technical anymore.
No,
They
not
are
technical,
economic.
But economic and safety. I mean, if all cars have this Wi-Fi, how easy it is to design some viruses which then stop all cars on the street?
In a way, this kind of question is really great because what Elisabeth presented which is very unusual, is something in this context we don't think about it very much, and it's very complicated, the discussions that are going on.
So
So I have a little bit of knowledge because we worked on some proposals for doing things like specifying and verifying properties of the SRC. And there are some projects supported by DARPA and US DOT to do security analyses of some of the protocols. So there's some formal methods thinking going on.
And this legislation proposal, it was really good. The text that was written and the references therein, they are right on top.
And when these things were getting set up, because it's complicated, like for all the pieces, there's like blacklisting, because since it's broadcast, right? I mean, you could just have a bad car. I mean, it could just be malfunctioning, or it could be an attacker. So you may blacklist certain addresses, certain vehicles, so that then requires lookups essentially on the internet, to the database, and the caching of this, because there are real-time constraints. But the security analysis, there's a lot of work in it.
Yeah, I know, but we are still far away from having solved all the problems. And then by blacklisting, just look at your email folder where some important emails end up in your spam folder.
Sure.
So these are complicated things, and I think people are pushing because they want to earn money, or want to earn money instead of someone else, and they are pushing for something which at the end is unsecure, and you have no other chance than using it. Because I'm really afraid that in 10 years I'm not allowed to drive my car myself, but I have to rely on these systems which are unsafe. So why not just take our time to develop these things and make thoughts about it instead of...
But it's I don't fully agree, because I think we have the same thing happening all over society. Airplanes, banking, hospitals. There's lots of medical life-supporting things that are wireless, and nobody argues about it. But then you have different things. You have restricted areas or something. So it could be that this could be restricted areas.
Yeah, but I can decide whether I want to use the
Yeah,
airplane.
but right now it's. There's lots of traffic accidents happening without communications. So if I'm gonna go 50 years ahead, I would think that it's gonna be like smoking. It's fun, but it's really too dangerous, so you shouldn't do it. It's going to be same with driving. You shouldn't drive, but it's fun, but
it was at the point too boring. You are safe.
So it's really driving is the most dangerous thing you can do.
I don't agree. But nevertheless, at least what I want to say is that our freedom is restricted. Someone else is earning money, and my security is decreased. And you say driving is dangerous, where it is not said that autonomous driving is not dangerous.
No.
I think it will be much more
I said
dangerous.
driving, yeah.
Because you cannot do anything. Once something happens, you cannot do anything.
But then it becomes a psychological discussion. So I would prefer to trust a system that has been programmed by people, responsible people, tested by a bunch of other responsible people, than to trust one guy who did not sleep last night and drank a bit too much and is late for kindergarten. Who do I trust?
It might be, but you give away control and you will never gain it back. And I think it is dangerous that we also lose abilities. Yes. Because everything is taken over and you can already observe it by young children today. They have completely different abilities than we do, because they do different things. And now it is really going to...
There's a lot of really good issues that are being kind of brought up. It's a complicated context.
Sure.
It's maybe have a panel about this to discuss these issues.
But I told my son he should do his driving license now, because later he's not allowed to drive anymore. He cannot have any fun.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for bringing up this really important topic.